Missing person cases are among the most intriguing true crime mysteries out there, since they're often filled with uncertainties, including the circumstances surrounding the disappearance, the people who were involved, and where that person disappeared to. But they're also often tragic cases that are never solved, and for the families and loved ones that stay behind, the uncertainty can be too much to bear. In 2014, 39-year-old Karen Rae Bosta moved from New Jersey, where she worked as a teacher, to Hertford in North Carolina, and here she moved in with her mother. She was taking medication on a daily basis for cognitive impairment, and when she mysteriously disappeared on the 30th of May the following year, there were grave concerns for her well-being, since she would have suffered serious side effects without them. On that day, Karen had plans to visit some of her friends, but before she set out to do so, she told her mother that she needed to run a few errands. She then left the house, and it just seemed like any other normal day. Later that same day, she sent a text message to her mother, saying that she would be coming home earlier than she expected, and that night at around 10 p.m., witnesses saw her exiting a Food Lion store that was located on North Broad Street and Coke Avenue. She'd used her mother's credit card to make some purchases, which wasn't strange, but it was odd that she did so on 3 separate transactions, rather than buying everything she needed at once. Her mother waited for her to return home that night, but she never did, and when she still wasn't home the following morning, her mother reported her missing to the Perquimans County Police Department. No one had any idea what had happened to Karen, but on the 31st of May, her mother realized that the same credit card used at the Food Lion store was used at a gas station in an area located between Edenton and Hertford. Then, on the 8th of June, investigators grew even more concerned when they found Karen's car abandoned in a parking lot that was situated between an apartment complex, and it was immediately searched after the doors were unlocked. Inside, they found no helpful evidence, since the only item found was the same packet of cigarettes that she'd bought at the convenience store before she disappeared. The keys were nowhere to be found, there was no sign of Karen, and there were no strange fingerprints on the car. It was then discovered that one of Karen's friends, a man named Thomas White, had used her mother's credit card at the gas station, and he was interviewed by investigators. When asked how he came to be in possession of the card, he stated that he found it lying on the porch of his house. He then agreed to take a lie detector test, which he failed. Despite this, investigators have stated that White likely wasn't involved with Karen's disappearance, but they do suspect that he may know more than he's letting on. He would eventually be charged with 1 count of obtaining property by false pretense in regards to the credit card, and he was ordered to serve 6 weekends in jail, after which he would remain on parole. Strangely, Karen's cell phone records indicated that she went to White's house on several occasions on the day she disappeared, and that she drove her car all over town during the day. Her phone either died or was turned off on the 1st of June 2016, more than a year after she vanished. While White is known to the police for past crimes that he committed, he maintains his innocence in Karen's case, despite it being suspected that she was the victim of foul play. A $20,000 reward is being offered to anyone who provides investigators with information leading to the closure of this case, as she still remains missing today. Karen is described as having brown hair and blue eyes. She stands between 5'2" and 5'4" inches tall, and at the time weighed between 140 and 150 pounds. She has a butterfly tattoo on her lower back and another of a strawberry between her shoulder blades. The last time that anyone saw Karen, she was wearing white shorts, a white t-shirt, gray slip-on shoes, and she had a pink pocketbook with her, as well as a butterfly keychain on which she kept her keys. If you have any helpful information on this case, you're asked to contact the Perquimans County Sheriff's Office at 252-426-5615, or the Edenton Police Department at 252-482-5144. Karen's nameless case number is MP30753. 30-year-old Amanda Ward-Romine disappeared from Springfield in Ohio on the 5th of July 2013, and she's not been seen or heard from since that day. At the time, she and Daniel Michael Romine had been married for a year, and they were living at 937 Avondale Avenue. The last family member to see Amanda was her sister, who lived in Indian Lake, Ohio, where she was visiting at the time. On the day of her disappearance, she left her sister's house to travel back home. But the following day, she contacted her sister once more and asked if she could pick her up on the 7th, 2 days after heading back to Springfield. She was then spotted by a witness on Buxton Avenue in Springfield, but she's not returned home since and remains missing. When she still hadn't returned home by the 9th of August, a missing person case was opened by her family with the Springfield Police Department, who then immediately started an investigation into her disappearance. Searches of the area where she was last seen were conducted, followed by several more searches in other areas, but no clues were ever found, and Amanda's disappearance remains a mystery. When it came to light that both Amanda and Daniel were in the habit of using illegal substances, suspicion fell on him, and he was named as a person of interest in her disappearance, since there had been no reports of domestic violence in the relationship. But Daniel refused to cooperate with the investigation, and a search warrant was issued for the couple's home to be searched. Daniel passed away in December of 2015 at the house that he and Amanda shared, and to this day it isn't known if he was responsible for her disappearance. Investigators are certain that Amanda fell victim to foul play, but they have no further evidence to follow up on, and her case is still under investigation. She has blonde hair and blue eyes, stands 5 foot 2 inches tall, and weighs about 130 pounds. She can also be identified by several tattoos, including a koi fish on her neck, the name Danny on her right foot, along with a few scars and the name Vroman on her left foot. Unfortunately, it isn't known what Amanda was wearing when she went missing. The Springfield Police Department has asked anyone with information on this case to come forward by contacting them at 937-324-7680, quoting case number 1337250. Amanda's NamUs case number is MP23304. It often happens that a missing person case goes cold when investigators are unable to track them down, only for the case to see renewed interest when the missing person is spotted months or even years after they were reported missing. And this is exactly what happened in the case of 21-year-old Dean Clayton Vroman, who disappeared from Wasilla in Alaska in 2022. Before he went missing, Dean was living in an apartment in Wasilla, and investigators have stated that they fear for his safety, since he was born with fetal alcohol syndrome that left him as a high-functioning dependent adult who would have trouble caring for himself on his own. There are very few details available on this case, but it is known that on the day that he vanished, the 2nd of May, 2022, he got into a verbal altercation with someone who's not been named, and rather than continue with the argument, he decided to walk away, but he's not been seen or heard from since. When his family couldn't get a hold of him by the 15th of May, they reported him as missing, and Alaska State Troopers launched an investigation in hopes that he would be found quickly since he was considered vulnerable. It's also known that he was spotted at Wonderland Park on the 15th of May, along with several other people who were thought to be minors, but this lead didn't progress the investigation, as no further clues were found. Just when it seemed that Dean's case would go cold, someone posted to Facebook that they'd seen him on Horizon Drive and Knit Goose Bay Road on the 19th of September. A woman who lives on Horizon Drive posted that she saw someone who looked like Dean walking around in her yard early that morning, but he soon left again. A search of the area was conducted, but no sign of Dean was found. It is still possible, though, that he remains in the Palmer or Wasilla areas. No further sign of Dean was ever found, and Alaska State Troopers have asked that anyone with information that could lead to his whereabouts contact them at 907-269-5511. Dean's family describe him as having brown hair and gray eyes. He stands 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighs about 180 pounds. The last time that anyone saw Dean, he was wearing a soiled white shirt, blue jeans, tan work boots, and had a blue beanie on his head. Dean's NamUs case number is MP92963. Investigators have also asked that people in the Palmer and Wasilla areas keep their eyes peeled in case he is spotted there. When someone has been missing for more than a decade, hopes of finding them begins to fade. But in the case of 24-year-old Christina Dawn Marie Kleckner, investigators are still hopeful that they'll receive new leads and she will eventually be found. Christina, who's known by the nicknames Tina and Tink, and who also sometimes goes by the alias Crystal Preston, went missing on the 1st of October 2011 from Cleveland, Ohio, and her case remains unsolved. At the time, she was sharing a house with her parents on West Street, and it should be noted that she's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Hence, she needs to take certain medications, as she's prone to violence if she doesn't do so. Christina also suffers from a developmental disability, and as a result, has the mental capacity of an 8-year-old child, meaning that she's extremely vulnerable on her own. When she went missing, she was in the process of recovering from addiction to alcohol, as well as certain illegal substances. She was last seen by her parents on the day that she vanished, and on that day, she had an argument with them, after which she left the house and they didn't have contact with her again that day. The argument was over whether she would be allowed to go trick-or-treating on Halloween of that year. Hoping that she'd calm down by the next morning, her father entered her room to talk to her, but he was surprised to find she wasn't there, and it's thought that she didn't return to the house at all after leaving. He found her pajamas in the room and found no clues as to where she may have gone. When they couldn't contact her, her parents reported her as missing to the Cleveland Police Department. Her parents became even more concerned when they realized that she'd left the house without her medication, but they noted that she'd taken a denim shirt, a pair of jeans, a pair of black boots, her denim purse, and a picture of Tinkerbell with her. The first step in the investigation was to search the immediate area around the family's house, but Christina was nowhere to be seen. Investigators then spoke to the family's neighbors, but no one had seen her after she left the house. They then contacted local shelters and hospitals in case she'd booked into one of those, but again, no one had seen or heard from her, and everyone involved was at a loss as to where she may have gone, though it should be noted that she may be using one of her nicknames or her alias. 6 years after she disappeared, investigators received information that Christina may be in the Edgewater neighborhood or the surrounding area, and a search was immediately conducted with the aid of search dogs, but once more they failed to locate her. It isn't known whether Christina met with foul play, but her case remains open, and any information that could lead to her being found can be relayed to the Cleveland Police Department by calling 216-623-5262. Christina is described as having brown hair and blue eyes. She weighs around 200 pounds and stands 5 foot 4 inches tall. She can also be identified by a scar on her left ankle, which is the result of a dog bite. She walks with a limp and has some discoloration on her face. The only item of clothing that she's known to have been wearing when she left her parents' house is a black jacket, though she may have changed into other clothes that she took with her when she left the house. Christina's NamUs case number is MP13524. The last time that anyone saw 35-year-old Shayna Hillary Feinman was on the 9th of March 2024. At the time, she was living on a 40-acre property near Peach Springs in Arizona. Several other people also live on the same property, including her boyfriend. The couple had made an arrangement with the owner of the property that they would clean several old trailers that were located there in exchange for their accommodation. But since her disappearance, her family has stated that they have many unanswered questions, since some of the details in her case don't seem to make sense. Shayna had relocated to Arizona in 2022. She'd become familiar with the area since she'd visited there several times, and finally decided that she preferred the area to the busy lifestyle she had before. After meeting her boyfriend, they moved to the 40-acre property, and it seemed to suit her perfectly, since she loved hiking and spending time in nature, and it was located close to a wooded area. Shayna was an avid outdoors woman who'd received training in outdoor survival as well as other activities such as hiking, and at one point was employed as a guide in Arizona while working for a wilderness therapy program. On the day that she disappeared, she was seen leaving the property at around 5:30 p.m., and witnesses stated that she simply walked into the adjacent woods without informing anyone what her plans were. But there are conflicting reports about what actually occurred, as one witness stated she got into an argument with the owner of the property before leaving, while another reported that she ran into the woods with someone chasing after her. Whatever the case may be, Shayna never returned to the property, and a week later, one of her friends decided to file a missing person report with the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office when they were unable to find her. Those who knew Shayna found it strange that she would venture into the woods without any of her camping gear, which was found inside of her car, along with her wallet and passport. She'd also left her dog with a friend before she disappeared. But she did have her cell phone with her, and it was later discovered on a different property sometime later. When the investigation into her disappearance started, 2 people who were known to have had contact with Shayna before she vanished refused to cooperate or answer any questions, but it isn't known whether they've had anything to do with her case. Cara Feinman, her sister, has stated that Shayna's disappearance strikes her as very suspicious, since she left all of her camping gear behind and she's still uncertain which of the witnesses to believe. A search of the property was carried out with the help of canine units, but they failed to find anything of interest. Dissatisfied with the progress being made on the case, Cara started her own investigation, and what she uncovered has left her feeling concerned for her sister's safety. She told investigators that she received voicemails and text messages in which Shayna stated that she was feeling unsafe and that she was scared. She's also noted that her sister's case bears some striking and alarming similarities to the disappearance of 32-year-old photographer Chelsea Grimm, who vanished after last being seen in Arizona. She also found that Shayna and Chelsea had some of the same acquaintances, as they both had lived in Connecticut at one point, and that both women vanished without taking any of their personal belongings. This is a truly baffling case, and a $10,000 reward is being offered to anyone who comes forward with information leading to Shayna's current whereabouts. Cara is certain that foul play is a factor in Shayna's disappearance, though there's no solid evidence to prove this theory. She's described as having brown hair and green eyes. She stands 5'1" or 5'5" inches tall, and at the time of her disappearance weighed 135 pounds. The last person to see Shayna stated that she was wearing sweatpants under shorts and a hoodie, as well as green hiking boots. If you or anyone you know has information on where Shayna could be, you're urged to contact the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office at 928-771-3260, quoting case number 2401354. Shayna's NamUs case number is MP120292. 25-year-old Susanna Escobedo is also known as Susanna Escobedo Rodriguez or Susanna Rodriguez. She's been missing since the 2nd of August 2018 after she vanished from Seadrift in Texas, and she's yet to be located. Before she vanished, Susanna was living in a mobile home on Loop Road with her children and husband. She'd just given birth to one of their children and hence had stopped working at a restaurant called La Terraza, where she was a waitress. Those close to her find her disappearance very strange, since she always kept in touch with her mother, who at the time was in Mexico. The two were known to be very close, and since she's not been in contact with her mother since she vanished, there are concerns that something untoward may have happened to her. Her family has also stated that she loved her children very much, and that she would never leave without them, since she relished her role as a mother. The last sighting of Susanna was at her home, where she'd been having conversations via text messages with some of her family members. But at 1 p.m., those messages suddenly stopped, and when her husband got home from his shift at work, he was shocked to find their 4-month-old baby alone, though he'd been given a bottle of formula, which he was busy drinking. When he couldn't find her or make contact with her by 7 p.m. that evening, he filed a missing person report with the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office. And inside the mobile home, he found her wallet, cell phone, and some of her other possessions. When the investigation into her disappearance started, the mobile home was checked for fingerprints, and some were found, but investigators have not revealed to the public who they belonged to. What is certain is that her husband was at work until 7 p.m., as it's been confirmed that he finished his entire shift that day. Searchers scoured the surrounding areas in hopes that they would find a clue as to where she had gone, but they were unsuccessful. These searches continued for a year, but yielded no results. There's a strong belief among investigators and Susanna's family that she was taken from the property against her will, and hence there are concerns for her safety. Susanna's family has hired a private investigator to help with the case, as they feel that investigators haven't done everything they can to crack her case, and as a result, they plan to launch a protest against their inaction. A reward of up to $1,000 is being offered for information in Susanna's case, but at present, no new leads have been received. She's described as having brown hair and brown eyes. She stands at 5'5" inches tall and weighs 140 pounds. She has a scar on the upper part of her left arm. On the day that Susanna went missing, she was seen wearing a black and white striped maxi dress. If you know what happened to Susanna or have any other helpful information that could be used to track her down, you're asked to get in contact with the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office at 361-553-4646. Alternatively, you can contact Texas EcuSearch at 281-309-9500. Susanna's nameless case number is MP51557. When 34-year-old Shelunda Matthews disappeared in 2008, she was living in Columbus, Mississippi with her boyfriend, specifically on 6th Avenue, and she was out on probation. She's also known by the nicknames Bolo and Wee Wee. A warrant for her arrest was issued after she disappeared, since she hadn't checked in with her parole officer, but up until that time, she'd been complying with all of the conditions of her parole. Her friends and family have stated that her disappearance is very strange, since she was in the habit of keeping in touch with them, and they're certain she would never have left the area without informing them where she was headed. On the 9th of October of that year, Shelunda met her boyfriend in a club in the area, and after spending some time there, they went back to their house. The following morning, her boyfriend gave her some money so that she could buy a few things that they needed in the house. But that was the last time that he had any contact with her, and she remains missing. Shelunda also had an arrangement with her mother that she would pick up some money each month to help her with her monthly expenses. But she failed to do so on this occasion, and her mother immediately became concerned. She'd also failed to check in on her son, who has special needs, which was very out of character. She was eventually reported as missing by her family, after which her boyfriend was questioned by investigators, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect in her disappearance. There are very few further details available on Shelunda's case, and investigators welcome any leads that may help further their inquiries, no matter how trivial they may seem. She's currently listed as missing and endangered. Shelunda is described as having brown hair and brown eyes. She stands at 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighs approximately 125 pounds. It should be noted that she's left-handed, and her family also added that both of her ears are pierced. Due to the lack of leads and information in this case, Shelunda's family and investigators have asked anyone who knows where she may be to contact the Columbus Police Department at 662-244-3554. Worrisome details have emerged during the investigation into the disappearance of 25-year-old Michaela Marton, who vanished from Concrete in Washington on the 21st of April 2023. Michaela originally hails from Mount Vernon, where she spent her childhood in the care of 2 aunts and her grandparents. When she went missing, she was single and had a son who was 2 years old. The first of the strange details in Michaela's case came 5 days before she disappeared. She made a post to Facebook that read, "If I ever go missing or anything, just know I didn't leave," suggesting that something untoward was going on in her life at the time. Then, on the 21st of April, she was seen running out of her house, which is located on Skagit View Drive, though it isn't known whether she was running away from or to someone, since the situation remains unclear. It also isn't clear what time of day this happened, but at around 5:04 the following morning, she made a call to 911, and the dispatcher reported that they could hear someone, presumably Michaela, calling for help and then screaming. They attempted to find out where she was at the time, but the call abruptly ended before the dispatcher could get this information. 17 minutes after the 911 call was made, Michaela phoned her father, but he missed the call since he was busy taking a shower. One of her neighbors would also come forward to say that he'd heard her screaming that day. But investigators were able to trace the call to a certain property, and they traveled there to look for her. But by the time they arrived, she was no longer there, and a search of the property failed to supply them with any clues. Michaela has not been in contact with any of her friends or relatives since, and her case is still under investigation. It would come to light that Michaela had contacted her brother at around 3 a.m. on the 21st of April, and she asked if he could pick her up. Her brother said that he would do so, but he had car troubles, and so her father offered to pick her up later. They also stated that her aunt informed them that she was, quote, in a dangerous situation. During an interview with investigators, Michaela's boyfriend changed his version of events twice, first stating that she ran out of the house barefoot and that he didn't bother to go after her. But he then stated after she ran out, he went after her, and then heard a car's engine as it sped away. And last, that he saw a silver car racing away from the scene, but that he didn't know who was driving it. Investigators have revealed that both Michaela and her boyfriend are well known to them, as there have been instances in the past where they've been called out to their house, though they declined to state why this was done. Strangely, investigators failed to interview any of the couple's neighbors on the day that she disappeared, and only did so on the 24th of April, when she'd already been missing for 3 days, though they did search the surrounding area with no results. The house that she was sharing with her boyfriend was only searched a week after she vanished, and investigators found her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was now staying there. 3 weeks later, Michaela's phone was discovered on the banks of the Skagit River, in an area close to the spot where she made the 911 call from, but her family is certain that it was placed there by an unknown person. After the phone was recovered, the section of the river was searched with the use of drones, a helicopter, and boats, but this was done in vain as nothing further was found. It should also be noted that her aunt told investigators that she'd become involved with the wrong kind of people. All these details, along with the many strange and worrying details in this case, have caused Michaela's family and investigators much cause for concern, and they continue to search for answers in this inexplicable case. Michaela is described as standing 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighing between 90 and 100 pounds. She has blonde and pink hair, though this may no longer be the case, and she has blue eyes. When she was last seen, she was wearing blue jeans and a black top. A Facebook page has been set up with details on Michaela's case. Since this case is still open and under investigation, all leads will be followed up on. If you have any further information on this case, or are able to supply investigators with information that could lead to her being found, you're asked to contact the Skagit Sheriff's Office at 360-416-1911. 45-year-old Melissa Lynn Howard has been missing since the 29th of March 2023, and to this day there have been very few leads in her case, though many people find her disappearance to be very suspicious, not only due to the lack of information, but because it took weeks before anyone reported her as missing. In cases such as these, investigators often have no choice but to rely on information received by members of the public, but in this instance, they have very little to follow up on, and no new information has been received. The last time that anyone saw Melissa was on the 1600 block of Magnolia Street in Slidell, Louisiana, on the 29th of March. On the 1st of April, an automatic license plate reader identified her car, a black 2015 Chevrolet Silverado, while it was being driven on Jefferson Highway near South Clearview in Jefferson Parish, heading in a westerly direction. It isn't clear exactly when, but the vehicle was later retrieved as it was found abandoned on the I-55 and was towed away. Her boyfriend contacted Melissa's mother on the 17th of April to report that it had been a few weeks since he had last seen her, though there's no information as to why he waited so long to inform anyone that she was missing. As soon as her mother learned that she had vanished, she filed a missing person report with the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office, and when her boyfriend's house was searched, investigators found her purse, wallet, driver's license, bank cards, and cell phone inside, but there was no sign of the missing woman. Frustratingly, there's no information available as to whether a search was conducted, whether anyone was questioned regarding Melissa's disappearance, or whether foul play is suspected in her case. It also isn't known what was found when her car was discovered, or whether it contained any strange fingerprints or DNA evidence. Many people also wonder whether the area around her car was ever searched, and if not, why this wasn't immediately done. It's also strange that her boyfriend stated that she left of her own accord, but that she then did so without taking her cell phone, bank cards, and other important items, such as driver's license, especially since she's said to have left in her car. Melissa's case seems to have many questions that still remain unanswered, but unfortunately, almost no information has been made available to members of the public, and her case is still under investigation. She's described as having brown or dark blonde hair with hazel eyes. She stands at 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighs between 180 and 200 pounds. She can also be identified by 2 tattoos, the first being of a fleur-de-lis on her upper right arm, and the second being of a star, located just above the first. There's also no information on what she was wearing when she left the house, despite her boyfriend stating that she left of her own free will, suggesting that he'd spoken to her right before she left. This case is being investigated by the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office, and if you have any information that you can think would be useful to investigators who are still trying to track her down, you're asked to contact them at 985-726-8000. Or you can get in touch with the Faces Lab at 225-578-4761. Melissa's nameless case number is MP103664. The disappearance of 23-year-old Cara Hyde occurred on the 5th of December 2021, when she vanished from Hamilton, Ohio, after leaving her mother's house, and at present she remains missing. At the time, Cara was living with her mother on Grand Boulevard while she studied at Miami University in Oxford. Unfortunately, Cara was struggling with an addiction to illegal substances, and at the time it's noted that her mother's house is in an area to locals known as the Knob, which is not always very safe. Her mother also told investigators that she'd been struggling with her mental health, including symptoms of histrionic disorder and borderline personality disorder, though it isn't known whether these symptoms have anything to do with her disappearance. Cara's mother last saw her on the 5th of December, after she told her that she loved her and left the house. Her mother had celebrated her birthday the previous day, and Cara told her that she was going out to buy her a present. Her mother awaited for her to return, but she never did, and she started to worry that something may have happened to her. But it would be another 2 weeks before her mother reported her as missing with the Hamilton Police Department, and she informed them that she'd been unable to make contact with her. Searches of the area turned up no leads, but unwilling to give up, her family started conducting their own searches, and in January, their efforts paid off when they found a bag containing some of her clothing in Crawford Woods, a few miles from the house. After this discovery was reported to the police, the area was thoroughly searched, but this was done in vain, as nothing further was found, though Cara's family have a few theories as to what may have happened to her. They've speculated that she may have placed herself in danger by looking to purchase illegal substances, though this remains a theory, as no evidence has been found to prove that this is the case. In the days and weeks following her disappearance, investigators monitored her social media accounts, but reported that they'd seen no activity since she vanished. Her phone also goes directly to voicemail, and hence it's believed to either be turned off or that the battery has died, making it impossible to track her movements that way. Her family also informed investigators that she's gone missing on a session in the past, but she always returned home after a few days, and the fact that she's been missing for so long is completely out of character for her. She's also known to spend a lot of time on her phone and her social media platforms, and so the fact that they've not been used at all since she disappeared is a major cause for concern. Despite her family's insistence to the contrary, investigators don't believe that foul play is involved in Cara's disappearance, though the Hamilton Police Department and Cara's family are offering a $4,000 reward for information that leads to her being located. Cara is described as having blonde hair and brown eyes. She stands 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighs approximately 120 pounds. She also has several tattoos, including the image of a girl climbing out of a well, a snake, and a skull on her right arm, the name Stephen on her left arm, and a garter belt on her left thigh, along with the word loser, with the S crossed out and replaced with a V, hence spelling lover. She also has a pierced navel. When she left her mother's house, she was wearing a fake fur vest and jeans. If you have any useful information on this case, you're asked to contact the Hamilton Police Department at 513-868-5811 or Cincinnati Crime Stoppers at 513-352-3040. Cara's nameless case number is MP88012. Randy Edding was said to be the photographer who took this strange image of some unexplained lights that were seen above Putnam County back in 1987. The quietness of New York's Hudson River Valley is home to both retirees and upscale professionals who tend to be well-educated people. It would come as a shock to find that this town was subjected to UFO fever. Between 1983 and 1986, more than 5,000 residents had reported seeing several UFOs in the area. These report to be dismissed as a hoax, but many maintain what they saw. It was excused to be a group of stunt pilots, but some residents stated that certain events could not have been the work of some standard airplanes. Pictured here was the image taken by Edding of lights that formed a disc shape, leading to the belief that it was a flying saucer. On the 17th of March in 1983, Dennis Sand, who worked for the government for 17 years, had spotted a large object near his home in Brewster, New York. Dennis described it as a metallic glider that flew very silently. Its lights were bright and iridescent and appeared like a city of lights. He and his family followed the object to the backyard, and he soon became frightened with thoughts of the craft landing and that they would be abducted by these extraterrestrials. They were not the only ones who had seen such extraordinary light formations. Just a few miles out, the traffic on Interstate 84 had stopped as the drivers became mesmerized by some lights overhead. and this was just the start of the Hudson Valley sightings. A week after this, an officer for the Newcastle Police, Andy Sadoff, had embarked on a routine patrol when he came across a curious event. The officer had been in the process of setting up to catch some speeding cars, but had been interrupted by a series of lights. Initially, Sadoff thought it was a plane, but soon realized it was much larger. There had been mostly white lights, but there was also a presence of green colors. It hovered up to the patrol car, but the officer did not appear afraid and was actually in awe of what he was seeing here. Another thing that grabbed his attention was that the aircraft was making no noise, no humming, not a single sound. Only seconds later, another eyewitness was logged. At the same time, a computer engineer named Ed Burns was on his way home on the Taconic Parkway, just a few miles north of where Sadoff was located. Burns suddenly received a whole lot of static on his radio and thought he was on the wrong number, but when he looked up, he saw a triangular-shaped ship as large as a football field, and again it made no noise. The engineer had pulled over and joined another group of motorists on the roadside. All of them were staring at the sky. The documented reports had all indicated that the unidentified object was moving very slowly in a northern direction over the Hudson River Valley. 10 minutes later, another 20 motorists had seen it near Millwood, and after that, the police station in Yorktown began receiving various reports. The officers, however, stated that they looked like airplanes and not extraterrestrial aircraft. This was not the case in 1986 for Robert Levine either, who was a recent graduate from a culinary institute. While on his way home from the St. Andrew's Cafe one evening, Robert had seen a curious sight of what he initially thought to be a low-flying helicopter. The enigmatic object appeared to be varying in size, and colorful lights circulated around it. With each blink of an eye, the ship changed from bigger to smaller, or from closer to further away. Rob also recalled there not being any sound at all. He recalled that the colors seemed to change shape. It would sometimes look like unknown letters. There was also a light emitting from the object that seemed to be going from the ground up instead of from the object down. While the man's brother believed Rob was having a tipsy vision initially, he soon changed his position when he learned that during the 80s and early 90s, the area was a UFO hotspot. Pictured here is an incredible image of the magnifying transmitter experiment and Nikola Tesla, who's sitting in the background. This machine emitting electrical spark was one of the inventor's many creations. Almost all modern power distribution systems use Tesla's designs, dating back over 100 years. He's the one to thank for radio transmission, fluorescent lighting, remote controls, and automotive starter coils. One of his first greatest inventions was the polyphase field, which was a generator of alternating current. With the use of a rotating magnetic field, the inventor could transfer mechanical energy into electrical energy in a much more effective way than any other generator that existed at the time. When he initially proposed the idea to a professor of electrical engineering, he was laughed at and told that the invention was a perpetual motion machine that would never work. Tesla's more extreme inventions were lost to time, and he kept important details safe in his memory. The inventor was also obsessed with resonance, causing his inventions to become more and more elaborate until he began experimenting with Earth's fundamental resonance. The experiments with the resonance of electrical energy led to the design of the Tesla coil. It was based off an already existing spark gap circuit, which would charge a capacitor from a secondary high-voltage transformer and discharge the capacitor through the air gap. A second transformer was then added to the design. The second resonance circuit was sized to be 1/4 of the wavelength of the frequency desired. The resonator circuit would create another circuit that would build up potential. It was using this particular design that Tesla could make high voltages at high frequencies. By running a connecting wire to the resonator around his laboratory, Tesla was able to spread the electromagnetic energy. It was so great that it was able to power a fluorescent light bulb in his hand due to the drop of voltage through the air. Thereafter, the magnifying transmitter was born. It was the adaptation of the Tesla coil, but instead of its purpose being to discharge to the Earth, this machine tuned to Earth's natural circuit to create standing electrical energy waves, which could then be harnessed by a receiving circuit. The official magnifying transmitter was an 18-story tower that was built at Wardenclyffe by Tesla, which derived from his experiments and visions in his laboratory. It was through various tests that he was able to create a method of converting direct current and low-frequency currents into high-frequency currents. This nerve-wracking picture, though, makes one think that this inventor is going to get an electrifying shock. Making for a hot topic in ufology is the farmer Paul Trent's UFO images from McMinnville, Oregon. Two black and white images arose in 1950. They'd been taken with a simple Kodak camera by Paul, a Yamhill County farmer. It was alleged that the man had snapped these pictures on the evening of the 11th of May. These images had not been the first UFO reports in the area, but they were the subject of the most studied and best photographic evidence of the existence of extraterrestrial life forms. It's believed that sightings of alien spacecraft had begun a few years prior to this in 1947, when a salesman was flying near Mount Rainier, where he allegedly saw 9 shiny saucers, and for the next few days, more reports had flooded in. That same year, an Air Force colonel announced that a flight group had captured a UFO, but his superiors denied such an allegation. Thereafter, various sightings were documented right up to 1950, when Evelyn Trent, Paul's wife, had been heading back to the house. She looked up to see the metallic disc and quickly informed her husband. Paul was able to get 2 pictures before it disappeared, but he'd not thought much about the incident at first. It was only when he had told a friend of the sighting that he learned that similar incidents were being reported across the US for the past few years. The images would soon appear on the front of the Telephone Register, a local newspaper, and not long after, the national media had gotten onto the allegation as well. Evelyn and Paul became famous and were flown across the world to appear on television interviews. The images were loaned to the International News Service, which then circulated them all across the globe. The pictures then found their way into Life magazine, the largest magazine in circulation at the time. But the couple never received any money for this, and the negatives were not returned to them for a good few decades before being misplaced by either the magazine or by the news service. Researchers who looked into the 2 photographs either dubbed them fake or authentic, and no conclusion has since come about. In 1997, the couple were interviewed again, this time by Brian Denson, who was with the Oregonian. Evelyn had told the interviewer that she'd seen a disc heading toward the house and handed a camera to her husband, who would then snap the picture. They were now living in an apartment in McMinnville, and it soon became clear that Paul was just about done with the whole story. He said to Evelyn, "I told you to forget all about it," to which she responded, "I know you did," before quietly saying to the interviewer, "We've been bugged so much." Despite the skeptics, the couple maintained the legitimacy of their story and the authenticity of their pictures right up until their passing. For decades, the photographs have been investigated, and scientists are still quite uncertain as to what the disc is that appears in the sky, and they're convinced that it's not a trick of photography. It was stated that this case is one of a few reports in which all factors had been investigated. These creepy-looking sketches are actually the first drawings of the much-loved famous Disney character Mickey Mouse. In these sketches, it appears that the mouse had a longer nose pointing downward, which luckily didn't make the final cut. Walt Disney had written the following in a 1948 essay called What Mickey Means to Me, saying, quote, "He popped out of my mind onto a drawing pad 20 years ago on a train ride." In the same essay, Walt refers to a disaster that surrounded the theft of his cartoon character Oswald the Lucky Rabbit at the hands of Charles Mintz, a Universal distributor. The Walt Disney Family Museum in the Presidio of San Francisco holds a variety of artifacts from the life and career of Walt Disney. Among items including photos, animation cells, miniatures, videos, and other memorabilia, the museum's most cherished possession is this page of sketches, which are said to be the earliest known sketches of Mickey Mouse. Marina Villar Delgado, the director of exhibition and collections at the museum, explained that the drawings were done in 1928, and the first idea for the name was Mortimer Mouse. Walt's wife, Lily, disagreed with the name, stating that that was no name for a mouse, and proposed the idea of Mickey. All the artwork is kept in the collection area of the museum and has some of the most rare and fragile features. The humidity and temperature here are maintained in a way that all the objects can be preserved. Most of these items are donated by the family and are cataloged as they come in. No item in the museum is as important as the original Mickey Mouse sketch. It was the beginning of it all. The sketch was rediscovered in the vault belonging to the family in the 1990s. Delgado explained that the original would be up for a few months before being replaced by another piece that they call cleanup. This is an exact replica of the drawing that was created from the original sketch at the time of its production. The original includes marks and annotations, as well as a large circle drawn in blue graphite, which symbolizes the final decision on Mickey's form. Pictured here is a prisoner whose punishment was public shaming in the form of the cangue. This contraption is referred to as kia or leia in Chinese, and is thought of as a portable pillory. They're carried around by offenders who've been convicted of petty offenses. The cangue is a square wooden collar that weighs between 20 to 60 pounds. The prisoner's head is placed through the central hole. For the period ordered, the offender must wear the item both during the day and at night, as he's left exposed in the street. A paste is used over the fasteners so that no one is able to liberate the condemned individual before their time is served. Generally, such punishment would last anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. The contraption usually spans from 3 to 4 feet across, so it's rather difficult for the convict to feed himself or even lay down, and must rely upon family, friends, or passers-by to give them food. The cangue has also been referred to as a yoke and is made from a large wooden board that's held together by iron alloy pins or fasteners. Archaeologists have discovered remains of these objects, of which some have handwritten Chinese inscriptions. The writing is in black and red ink on paper that surrounds the hole in which the villain's head goes through, which is an indication that it was used in Shanghai. From the 8th year of the Kanzi period in 1669 onwards, Manchu criminals would be confined to this form of punishment, but would be released within a short time, either 10 days or more in some cases. Manchi refers to a member of Manchuria who'd conquered China, where a dynasty was thereafter established in 1644. Through the various periods, the jurisdictional system operated with different regulations for the cangue sizes. During the Northern Dynasty period, the only people who had to wear the heavier devices were rebels. But during the Northern Qi Dynasty, this only applied to convicts who were sentenced to penal servitude. In Northern Zhao, criminals who were going into exile were required to wear it. The device that this convict was wearing was not the only type of cangue of this period, though. Another type was the barrel-shaped cangue, where the convicts would be placed inside the barrel with only their heads sticking out. Another type had 2 holes for convicts' heads, which was called a double cangue. On either end of it, the names of the criminals would be inscribed. During the later periods where these contraptions were used, the legal system would discern between different weights, ranging from 15 gen to 25. The cangue was also lengthened, becoming 5 to 6 qi long. It was also during the Ming period that this device was worn for much longer, anywhere from a month to half a year, and in the rarest cases for the rest of the convict's life. The Qing dynasty adopted the system, but as a surrogate for other punishments such as exile, penal military service, or servitude. During this era, the creation was as heavy as 70 gen, which would later be reduced to just 25, and then raised once more to 35. During the Qing period, this form of punishment was abolished altogether. This rare photo shows a railway signalman, James Edwin Wyde, and Jack the Baboon. In the 1880s, James, an amputee, was visiting a southern African market when he witnessed something quite curious. It was a Chakma baboon driving an ox cart. He was so impressed by the primate's skills that he bought him and named him Jack. The baboon would become his pet and personal assistant of James, who certainly needed the help after a work accident left him without his limbs. The first thing that the man had taught his new primate companion was to push him in a trolley to and from work every day. Soon after that, Jack would be doing the household chores, including taking the trash out and sweeping the floor. But it's the signal box where the baboon really shines. While trains approached the rail switches at the station, located along the Port Elizabeth Mainline Railroad, they would emit their whistle a certain amount of times to alert the signalman of the change. By watching James, the baboon would quickly pick up on these patterns and eventually start to tug on the levers by himself. His master would begin to train him by holding up 1 or 2 fingers, and the primate would pull the right lever. Initially, he would look to the man for confirmation, but soon needed no guidance at all. This led to some newfound freedom for the actual signalman, who was able to just lay back and let the primate handle the work. While operating the lever, with each approaching train, Jack would also catch the various offerings that would be tossed to him by the passing passengers. The story states that one day, a train passenger described as Posh was staring out the window when he saw that it was a baboon who was manning the gears. He quickly complained to the railway authorities, but instead of firing Jack, they decided to test his abilities, and the result astounded them. A railway superintendent, George B. Ho, exclaimed that the baboon knew the signal whistle just as well as he did. Ho also wrote of the fondness that the creature had for the man, where upon his visit, James had sat in the trolley with Jack's arms around his neck and one hand stroking the man's face. Jack's talents spread quickly through the town. Passengers and railway workers were amazed to see this baboon working with humans, and he soon became a celebrity. Crowds would stand around and marvel at his abilities, and his story was even featured in the local newspapers. This recognition turned the creature into a symbol of inspiration. His efforts did not go unnoticed either. It was found that the baboon was given an employment number and a salary of 20 cents a day. He was also equipped with an official signalman uniform and a small signalman's hat. This gesture had underlined the trust that the community had for their non-human colleague. In 1890, he passed away after having worked the rail for 9 years without making one mistake. Upon his unfortunate passing, James was inconsolable. Ho had also detailed how the goodbye between the pair had gone upon his visit. He'd gone up to the baboon to shake his hand, and he gazed up at the man and gave him his paw, followed by a grunt. The pair then disappeared into the darkness. Jack's remains were donated to the Almaty Museum in Grahamstown, South Africa, where he's on display. Additionally, there's a dedicated wall at the railway which stands in honor of the baboon and his human partner. Many residents of Boren City gather around an area where students claim to have seen the Virgin Mary various times. They sat at the viaduct waiting for Mary to appear. It had been just the day before when students allegedly saw her around their school, not far from where the citizens were seated. During 1932 and 1933, sightings of the mother were on the rise. In 2 of Mary's apparitions, she appeared to the students, delivering simple messages that were incredibly profound. In the Boren village, she appeared 33 times from the 29th of November 1932 to the 3rd of January the following year. Mary encouraged visitors to be good and pray regularly. Mary had featured in Fatima during the First World War, and Boren had occurred a few years prior to the Second World War. During this time, Boren was a sanctuary where many flocked for prayer. The mother has also revealed her heart as being golden, and during her apparitions at Fatima in 1917, she asked that the scholars pray for peace and emphasized her devotion to her Immaculate Heart. In the descriptions of the women, when she appeared, she was always said to be smiling. Almost 2 weeks following the Boren apparitions, she was spotted again 8 times from the 15th of January to the 2nd of March in 1933. It was believed that these sightings were made up, but such doubts would soon subside. The events that occurred in Banu could be viewed similarly to that of the continuation of Fatima, except this time as the renewal of the message of the Lord's. Mary had revealed herself in a similar looking dress as she had in Lourdes, and she had also dedicated a spring of water for healing. The water in this case already existed and was not made from nothing. In these sightings, the woman had stated that she'd come to relieve the sick and wished to relieve suffering. She wanted the citizens to have faith in her. It was after these various sightings that caused the gatherings around the village, as they waited for the apparition to reappear since it had done so various times previously. In one of her appearances, Mary's knees could be seen moving beneath her robe, and her feet were obscured by clouds. Others described her as being clothed in a long white dress, decorated with a white veil and a golden crown of light. Her hands were positioned before her chest in a gesture of prayer. The initial series of sightings in Boren was recognized as authentic in 1949, and it became a celebrated day each year. In 1949, Father Joseph Deberg of Lowell, Massachusetts, had founded the Pro Maria Committee to spread the story of Mary's 33 appearances. He made the use of pamphlets and tours to spread the message, and worked closely with the Marian Library. Deberg and Don Sharkey were awarded the Marian Library Medal in 1958 for their book entitled Our Lady of Boren. He's also been responsible for translating documents from Bishop Cheru and obtained permission to publish them in the Marian Library publication Marian Reprints. In the 1970s, the committee would go on to donate to the library, which included 3 binders of photographs, holy cards, and various pictures that documented history and activities that were related to the apparitions. The photographs had included a mix of originals that members had taken during pilgrimages to the shrine in the 1950s and 1960s, as well as reproductions of images that were taken around the time of the initial appearances in 1932 and 1933. This picture comes from Almaty, Kazakhstan, and reveals just how polluted the area is. The smog is the result of a temperature inversion, where various factors may cause the warmer air to rise above the colder air. The colder air, mixed with the pollution, becomes trapped beneath the warmer atmosphere. Almaty is the largest Kazakhstan city whose citizens struggle for air. The smog has become an almost permanent feature that mars the view of the snow-capped mountains. It only took a quarter of a century of urban planning to lead to the erosion of greenery. It took only that long for the air quality to become dangerous. The erosion gave way to a proliferation of large buildings that ultimately disrupted any natural ventilation, trapping the pollution that's been churned out by the growth of vehicles emitting harmful fumes, which now clog the roadways. The causes of such great air pollution include the heavy industries and stations that use coal, residential buildings that use solid fuels and heating stoves, and outdated transportation that does not meet emission standards. This city is one with the highest number of cars, which was found to be around 470,000 at the end of 2019. As more people move into the area, there will be an increase in urbanization, which inevitably brings in more cars and energy that's needed to sustain these citizens will further negatively impact the environment. A timeline from 2019 reveals where the pollution is coming from. On the 8th of November in 2019, it was found that air pollution is being caused by factories, which posed a great threat to public health. Mining and the processing of mining resources, oil and gas, were also to blame, along with gasoline and diesel vehicles. On the 7th of September in 2020, the main source of air pollution in Almaty came from the emission of a coal power plant and intensified traffic. What made this worse was the buildings that blocked the flowing winds. The city was looking into modernizing its thermal power plant, and in this same year, 250,000 trees were being planted. During the quarantine period, pollution had fallen, but the airborne levels of toxic chemicals were on the rise, passing far above the World Health Organization limits. On the 3rd of October in 2021, it was recorded that a positive trend had been outlined in the Environmental Code, which is the management of payments that come from the local budget as a pollution charge from the factories. 100% of these charges are used to finance activities that are aimed at improving the ecological situation, which includes the air quality. On the 28th of March in 2022, the New World Bank reported that the largest source of the air pollution with fine particles was coming from dispersed residential heating stoves as well as boilers. As per the IQ Air, the air quality monitoring platform, PM 2.5 concentration in the city often exceeds the World Health Organization ambient air quality guidelines by 17 times throughout the course of winter. PM 2.5 refers to fine particulate matter, which is defined as being 2.5 microns or less in diameter. This reading for Almaty is currently 2.5 over the guideline value. The air quality index is currently at 52, and the air pollution level is moderate. It's suggested that citizens living in these conditions should reduce their outdoor exercise, wear a mask outdoors, run an air purifier in their homes, and close their windows to prevent the polluted air from entering their homes. Pictured here is the Hungarian engineer named Stefan Pral. Pral was known as the Invisibility Man after he invented a machine that was said to turn people and objects invisible. The picture was taken in Hungary in 1935 by an unknown photographer. Other images that are connected to this engineer are stamped as the 1st of April, 1935, in the archives of a famous newspaper called El Mundo. But this was no April Fool's joke. Pral was said to be an occultist who gave the journalist an invisibility demonstration. He'd placed 3 objects in his machine, which included a teddy bear, a bronze statue, and an opaque china vase. The machine was a wooden box fronted by a picture frame, and behind it a slanted object, Coming out of the rear were a series of electrical cables connected to a supply, but unfortunately, the images that showed the objects fading have mysteriously disappeared. Pral would later demonstrate how he could make a pack of cigarettes and a picture of a woman disappear. He placed it in the box and invited onlookers to watch the show. These objects would disappear and reappear once more. He even had the guests handle the objects to demonstrate that they were real. He maintained that his invisible rays were responsible for this effect. Modern mechanics had stated that Pral was an optics professor, suggesting the idea that he was a university teacher. It seems unlikely, though, that such an institution would be favorable to one of their staff touring for 18 months. The electrical engineer claimed that his invention was not just a mirror trick, but was a real discovery that he made about light rays. In one of his shows, he'd even vanished and then brought back a Dachshund. There were some pulling of levers which were connected through wires to the apparatus. Some suggested that they could hear the dog bark, proving that it had gone through a trap door. But it can be argued that the dog was just invisible, meaning that it was still able to make a sound but couldn't be seen. At one point, a living person had volunteered to be vanished by Pral. He asked her to speak once she was invisible, but there was silence. He then walked over to the chair that she was supposed to be sitting on and waved his hand over the area, and there was no resistance. A police investigation was carried out to find the missing woman. Through the investigation, it was found that the man had no assistants and there was no one backstage. The invisible man was also mentioned in a Scottish newspaper, Dundee Evening Telegraph, page 8. It was stated in the article that he'd made objects of stone, wood, and even a volunteer's hand become entirely invisible. By turning on a current, the objects in the wooden box would gradually start to fade away before becoming invisible. One is able to touch the objects during the process, but their hand too will become invisible. In one demonstration, a volunteer was able to hold the objects in the box while Pral pulled levers and pushed buttons. The objects in the person's hand would become dim and blurred before disappearing entirely, along with the hand that holds it. An onlooker places his hand inside and sure enough, the objects are still there, but they can't be seen. It was stated that the engineer had accidentally stumbled across this phenomenon while experimenting with mercury vacuum lamps in a laboratory in Budapest. He discovered that when objects were subjected to rays whose nature has gone undetermined, it would become blurred and fade and then vanish. This image is a scene from the Scottish Highlands. It was taken from the top of a hill where Beryl Petty, a hill walker from Yorkshire, had spotted a UFO. She was accompanied by her husband Lynn, who had unfortunately missed seeing the object by the time Beryl had gathered her thoughts. On the 30th of June, in 1981, the Aberdeen Press and Journal had published an article that was headed as "Hill Walker Claims UFO Sighting in Sutherland." It was detailed that a large silver disc that left a golden trail had swooped directly across the clear sky to land on the 800-foot hill that Beryl and Lynn had been walking on at noon. The woman was an ex-wartime WAAF, as well as a former employee of the Air Ministry's Meteorological Office, and maintained that what she had seen was not a balloon, nor was it an aircraft. None of these suggestions had quite captured what she had seen that day. The article detailed that she was from Narrow Lane, Harden, close to Bingley. She was interviewed at her holiday address located in Sutherland. She described that they heard no sound coming from the craft and were expecting a noise consistent with that of an explosion, but there was not even a murmur. Beryl also thought that there would be some burning due to the speed of the unidentified object, but there was nothing, not even the smell of smoke. Len, an ex-army man, explained that since he had nothing to compare its size to, it must have been much further away than he had thought. The sight had certainly given Beryl a shock, but also mystified her. By the time she was able to gather herself, the UFO had started up and flown out of sight, leaving no evidence on the hill or in the sky. It was alleged that the spokesperson for the Benbecula headquarters of a guided missile range had stated that there was no firings at the time. In addition to this, Stornoway Coast Guards received no reports of an unusual sighting or incident. It's uncertain as to what the woman had seen that day, but her description was consistent with most of the extraterrestrial aircraft sightings that have been documented throughout the years. While time travel is a topic discussed in fictional books and movies, some individuals have come to claim that they've experienced the event firsthand. These claims have been documented throughout history, but it also appears in recent years. One such person was Noah Novak, who claimed to have been a time traveler from the year 2030 and alleged that he'd met himself in the year 2070. The two men, both called Noah, had given an interview that was publicly released to prove the story's legitimacy. In a video, a man from 2030 stated that the person who sat beside him had some compelling information that was able to convince him that the two were the same person, but from different years. The original Noah stated that the man had personal information on him that could only come from someone who had stalked him for his entire life. The two time travelers had predicted that Donald Trump would be re-elected in 2020, and that life on Mars would be a reality soon enough. They alleged that Bitcoin would become the world's main currency at some point in the future. In this supposed period, the streets were void of vehicles, and the streets were made up of one big sidewalk. Noah stated that when he looked at the sky, all the cars were flying overhead, which appeared chaotic since there were so many of them. He also went on to say that some of the information that proves that the two are the same person is classified to ensure that the government doesn't get to him. While he was unable to get into much detail about 2070, there are some details that may reveal that the two are the same person. In the video, the two look and sound incredibly dissimilar. That being said, 40 years is a long time, over which one can change appearance, personality, and voice. According to the 2070 time traveler, microchips have been inserted into those who can jump through time that prevent them from saying or doing anything that would change the course of events. The 2030 version alleged that he'd risked his life previously to tell the present dwellers about what the future has in store for us. Aside from the claim regarding Donald Trump, Noah also predicted a variety of other futuristic events. These included that AI will gain momentum, and machines of a Google Glasses style will be taking over. Phones will start to grow in size towards the year 2030, and robots that are able to run a home are being introduced. Global warming problems have increased where Northern America is much warmer than it is today, and Europe is much colder. In 2028, humans will fly to Mars, which is the same year that the existence of time travel will be revealed to the public. Some diseases around this time have also been cured, including certain forms of cancer. The time traveler has made other allegations aside from time travel, including that he's actually a 50-year-old man who'd taken an age-rejuvenating pharmaceutical to turn him into a 25-year-old, likely a medication that was made somewhere in the future. According to an interview with Paranormal Elite, Noah alleges that time travel is something only used by top-secret organizations. But of course, we won't know if any of this is true until the year 2028. A man who goes by the name Edward alleged that he was a time traveler and has photographic evidence for his claim from the year 5000. His descriptions, though, appear to not be very good for humanity. Through a chilling peek into our future, an image shows an underwater city, which he says is Los Angeles, 3,000 years from now. The man explained that he was part of a top-secret experiment that allegedly took place in the year 2004. The experiment had given him the ability to time travel and get some evidence as to what he had seen. According to the mysterious man, he was working in a laboratory in Los Angeles when he'd been given a task to travel through time and take some pictures. He would come to claim that he was standing on a large wooden platform. The houses and buildings were all made of wood, and he soon realized it was LA, but it had been submerged underwater. Edward alleged that people were forced to live underwater after the melting of the ice caps, a direct result of global warming. The photographic evidence that the man held in his hands up to the camera is what he called the end of the world. According to him, he'd taken a trip back into the past to show us all the cities around the world would be submerged. Since his return, he'd been working with his photographic reckonings in a lab in order to come to some sort of plausible conclusion that may also be horrific. In an interview, Edward had said the following, saying, quote, "I'll tell you a story that will amaze and astonish you. The event I'm going to tell you happened in 2004 in Los Angeles, United States of America." A video of the interview had circulated in 2018 and went viral again shortly after. The video included a creepy experience in a machine that had taken the man into the future. The story continued when he revealed that he was not alone on this trip and that a mystery man had accompanied him. It was the man who told Edward that the post-apocalyptic flood was caused by global warming. It was all due to global warming. Both of the world's poles had collapsed after more ice had melted and the world went underwater. According to the time traveler, the flood occurred due to there being too much CO2 in the atmosphere, which destroyed the shield zone, exposing us to the harmful sun. This was not the first time, nor will it be the last, that time travelers have come forward with claims of what they saw in the future. An earlier video, released by someone calling themselves Future Time Traveler on TikTok, allegedly spotted aliens on our planet, who he alleged would incite a war against humanity. These allegations are continuously being made from various parts of the world, but are being deemed as fake or false by various organizations and scientists who specialize in the subject. NASA, for one, stated that we cannot use a time machine to travel to the future or the past, and this is a concept only present in books and movies. Edward Albert Meyer, mostly referred to as Billy, is a Swiss national who claimed that he'd been in contact with aliens in the Pleiades star cluster in the 1970s. He also allegedly had photographic evidence of the ordeal. Other convincing images would depict the claim that he was taken back into time to the era of the dinosaurs. His first contact with these alien life forms was in 1942, and thereafter they maintained regular contact. A series of images of what appear to be flying saucers were taken in Switzerland in 1976. These images were not carried out by an expert photographer and show blurry metallic saucers hovering above the mountainous countryside. The images were published in a book by Wendell C. Stevens, a former United States Air Force pilot. They would later be featured in public material for the United States science fiction program called The X-Files. Stevens alleged that the photos in question were not subject to fabrication, but other ufologists are skeptical about their authenticity. Billy claimed that he met an extraterrestrial named Sfaf. In 1975, this alien returned along with his granddaughter, who was named Semjas. It was further stated that he'd gone aboard the spacecraft and had various conversations with the Pleiadian, and was given permission to photograph and video them. These aliens had also taken him to the past during the time of the dinosaurs. In 1958, the man began to make claims that the world would be ending soon, as well as there being a third world war, which changed from 2006 to 2008, and then to 2009 and then 2012. These predictions likely came from his time-traveling journeys with his alien companions. During one of the trips, they'd gone back to the age of the dinosaurs, where Billy snapped some more blurry pictures that he would later release as proof of time travel. But some of the images were later found to have come from a book. While some of his images and allegations proved to be false, or were speculated to be so, the ufologist maintained his position that aliens exist and that he'd gone on various ventures through space. The truth of such claims will remain a mystery. The predestination paradox refers to a strange phenomenon where the person who's traveling back in time becomes part of past events and could have even caused the initial issue that provoked the person to travel back in the first place. The paradox is also referred to as a causal loop or a temporal causality loop. This phenomenon comes into existence when a traveler is caught in a loop of events that predestines them to travel back. Causality is turned upside down as the events are both causes and effects of one another. Due to the possibility of influencing history while time traveling, one way of explaining why it does not change is by stating that whatever has happened was meant to. A traveler who attempts to change the past in this model would be fulfilling their role in the creation of history, not in its change. This raises the question of whether or not there really is such a thing as free will. An action essentially becomes its own cause, which creates a rather complex temporal situation. A crucial element in this paradox is that of free will versus determinism. The traveler would often be faced with the question as to if they have control over their actions, or if they're bound by a continuous loop of fate. The paradox also ties in with the idea of multiple timelines. As the travelers journey to different times, they may find different versions of themselves, and also witness the consequences of their actions. This concept is often found in science fiction movies, TV shows, or books. In layman's terms, this paradox means that the time traveler is in the past and has therefore been in the past before. Their presence would become vital to the future because they would do something that causes the future events to occur in the exact same way. This paradox connects somewhat with the ontological or bootstrap paradox and often occurs at the same time. Back in 2017, various online platforms circulated a video in which a man claims to be from the year 3207. Apex TV had taken a flight to Greece where they would sit down with the man for an interview. He alleged that he was part of a top-secret Greek military experiment where he had been the test subject for a time machine. The individual begins the interview by greeting everyone and stating that they're in Greece. He also expressed gratitude for Apex TV being there and giving him the opportunity to tell history. The man stated that he'd seen various time traveler videos and found them to be ridiculous, and is aware that the topic is quite controversial. He told the audience that he knows that the story may not be believable for most, but that they should try to keep an open mind. He began his story by stating that he was 28 years old and was absorbed into the Greek military at the age of 18. At the age of 24, he was invited to partake in a secret operation and was told that it would bode well for his career. The traveler was interested, but when he requested further information, he was denied this. It was said that no one had to know any information at the time, and he was given 3 days to accept or decline. But he gave his answer within a day, and based on what came next, he quite clearly accepted the invitation. 28 pages of agreements were signed, and everything was agreed to be a secret, which means that the man was essentially putting his life at risk to inform the public of the secret project. Thereafter, the traveler was led to a room where the project's goal was revealed to him. He was told of a device that he would be the first to test out, and it had only been previously tested in theory. Soon, the individual would become somewhat frightened, but was unable to refuse due to the award money he would be given. After being hooked up to the machine, the traveler was informed that in just a few minutes, he would be sent to the year 3207. He had to remain in this time for 11 minutes. Warmth was felt up in his face, and he opened his eyes to see what he believed looked like Empire State Buildings stacked on top of one another. The buildings were incredibly large. It was described that the streets were thin lines, and the flying cars were said to have similarities to today's electric cars. It was further alleged that the grass was not green, but rather a deep purple. While looking around, he saw ordinary people, large animals, aliens, and robots all walking together as if they were coexisting. The traveler had seen a family of extraterrestrials playing together, and generators littered the city, highlighted with a blue glow. These, as it was understood, were energy stations for the cars. It was uncertain if they were professions, such as police officers or pizza delivery services, due to the amount of robots that were everywhere. 2 robots were seen talking with one another, and they began to laugh, leading the traveler to believe that they were implanted with artificial intelligence. One may never know if it's good or bad for humanity. When he was sucked back into the present day, the man was taken to a small room where he was told to sleep. It was when he awoke and spoke with the officials that he realized he'd actually spent 2 full days in the future, instead of the designated 11 minutes. The time traveler expressed the idea of the upcoming robot AI takeover, but this didn't appear to be an exaggerated concern, thus leading to the question as to why he may feel the need to tell the public of this story, while also risking his life to do so. Strangely enough, another time traveler from the year 3300 also spoke of a robotic takeover. Perhaps in 3207, the initial thought of an uprising was being circulated, and only carried out about 100 years later. William Taylor allegedly passed a lie detector test in which he details his journey to the future. The man claims to have gone to the year 8973, where he met telepathic robot-human hybrids. According to him, this was a project that was being sponsored by the British government. The time traveler stated that he spent around 6 hours in the future and did not want to return. He described the world in 8973 as a utopia with no conflict or crime and cures for every issue. William was sent to this time as part of a top-secret project being carried out by the British government. Cyborgs also inhabited the world and had abnormally large heads and eyes but small mouths. These residents were also gifted with immortality. There was also an alien life form that supposedly descended from humans and had the ability of telepathic communications. William, however, was able to speak with them in standard English, and he stated that the residents of this futuristic world all spoke fluent English as well. According to his allegation, everyone was implanted with a chip that scans and translates words into whatever language they're comfortable with. He'd spoken with these life forms for quite some time, and they told him that they could live forever. They seemed to be unsurprised at the fact that the traveler was even there, leading him to believe that this was a regular occurrence. It was also in this year that the man had noticed a large red glow in the sky. When he asked the inhabitants what the glow was, they told him it was the red supergiant that had exploded into a supernova and was not visible from Earth, taking its position beside the sun. It was found that he'd not been the only human in this timeline, as he'd met another traveler from the year 2055. William told the other man that he was from 2005, and the conversation led him to the conclusion that time travel was on the free market and open for public use. It was said that it was his moral responsibility to inform the public about the existence of time travel and what the future holds, even though he'd sworn not to tell anyone about this project. The time-traveling technology, according to William, has been around since 1981. This was not the only occasion that the time-hopping individual has claimed to have been taken into the future. A cylindrical machine had projected him into the year 3000, but this time it was not a utopia. The sky was red and the world was full of pollution. He didn't wish to stay there once he realized that he was being exposed to radiation, which was present in the air. He'd not seen a single person during this trip, but had seen some sort of flying object above him. He got back into the machine and exited the scene abruptly. In the video of the interview, he's asked if cyborg life forms had colonized other planets, and it appears that they did. The man proceeded to give details about the time machine. It was spherical and only big enough to fit one single person inside. The creation is encased in a thick layer of lead, according to the traveler, which is done to protect the individual from radiation. Further claims suggested that we live in a simulation, and that the time travel is simply a person jumping to different simulations. What's incredible about these claims is that William was placed on a lie detector test, which was carried out by Apex TV, and he passed most questions. When asked if he was being put at risk for telling the public about this information, he responded that he was not and he should be fine. This was found to be false. Paradoxes are also something that exists based on the traveler's work with the British government. These paradoxes would only be caused should something incredibly drastic happen. In his venture in time, William was also able to find that the Mandela effect was quite real. The phenomenon is said to be the result of a number of different experiments that are being carried out by various governments. Time travel was also accomplished through the breaking down of alien spacecrafts. Scientists have used some technology or parts from these vehicles to aid them in the creation and stabilization of motioning through the years. According to him, time travel will be possible for everyone by 2028, so it seems we won't have to wait long in order to go through the skipping of ages. Unlike others who have claimed to have jumped through time, this man prefers to be right out in the open, instead of hiding who he is, and remains confident in his allegations. A time traveler from the year 3300 was tracked down to Paris and has come to warn us of the unpleasant future that awaits us. The traveler has come back from the future to tell us of the impending apocalypse where the human race would have to fight against a robotic army. According to the time hopper, there was one computer controlling everything that was not being handled by a person, but was able to make all decisions and demands by itself. What's even more disturbing is that this computer was equipped with the ability to destroy the entire planet at once. The man alleged that he was born on the 1st of December in 3258 in the European Empire. At the age of 18, he was drafted into the army and wore a uniform that was made from gold. He'd seen what happened 2 years later in 3260, where fuel and gas were no longer used. Instead, energy is received from sun batteries. There are no trees and only very few animals. He also remarked that there were robots everywhere, a piece of information consistent with the traveler from 3207. Also consistent with the other travelers was that these robots were incredibly intelligent, possibly a form of AI, and were able to make decisions and communicate with one another. The future, according to this time traveler, is absolutely tragic, and he would do anything to prevent these events from occurring, hence why he traveled back to our time. The robot war had started on the 21st of September in 3300, when he was at the age of 42. In addition, there were also aliens who lived among people who also fought against the robotic armies. The only item available to humanity was laser automatic machines. All phones and weapons had been lost. If one were to be seen by a camera, these robots would know immediately, and only 800 people were able to hide away, but in 3 days all communications were lost. A month later, only 250 people remained. There was no way for these last groups to rise up against the robots, and so the man traveled back to try and destroy the technology that would cause the collapse of the world. It was never explained how the man was able to travel back in time, though. The interview was uploaded to Paranormal Elite, a YouTube channel. These claims seem to be on the rise in recent years, and Apex TV seems to be at the base of it, with their various interviews with a number of different alleged time travelers. An American theoretical physicist named Joseph Polchinski had proposed a paradox scenario where a billiard ball enters a wormhole and emerges out the other side in the past, just in time to collide with itself and prevent it from going into the wormhole in the first place. Some solutions have been made to avoid the inconsistencies that scientists have suggested. These solutions evolve the theory to suggest that the ball may be able to deliver a blow that changes its younger version's course, but not enough to prevent it from entering the wormhole. The solution is also connected with the timeline protection hypothesis. The theory states that if one were to throw a billiard ball into one end at the right speed and angle, such that it comes out the other side in a way that may prevent itself from going into that hole in the first place, the twist comes in where the pool table is a time machine, and the two pockets are connected by a wormhole, allowing the ball, which could be anything, to travel through time. This tends to be a popular one among scientists, and is taken seriously with various papers and journals having been published on the subject. General relativity is said to allow time travel, and one solution suggests the presence of a closed time-like curve, which is the key to traveling through time. Closed time-like curve refers to the path through space-time that ends at the start. This would mean that an individual or an object can make a trip through the curve and return back to the start. Joe Polchinski had put forward this paradox in 1990 to Lip Thorne, who discussed it thoroughly in a 1994 publication, Black Holes and Time Warps. This theory also caught the attention of physicist Fernando Echeverria and Gunnar Klinkhammer, who'd explore the underlying physics of the possible trajectories and collisions of the ball. Their research found various scenarios where the future version either knocks the past version directly into the wormhole, or fails to hit it with enough force to prevent it from entering at all. They applied quantum mechanics to the proposed scenarios, and found that the theory can yield a variety of outcomes, and the likelihood of a non-paradoxical outcome was high. Students would later find solutions that would avoid these inconsistencies, where the ball would emerge from the future at a different angle than the one that was used to generate the paradox. It would therefore deliver the younger version with a blow instead of knocking it out of the way completely. The blow would inevitably change the trajectory in the right way, so that it would be able to travel back with the required angle to collide with the younger self. The timeline protection hypothesis states that a probability distortion would occur in order to stop a paradox. This would assist the explanation of the grandfather paradox, in which changing the course of history would not be achievable, and something would happen to keep everything on its course, thus keeping our version of history consistent. This theory was also brought to Reddit, where one user stated that the scenario sounds a lot like Schrodinger's cat, where the ball is in both states at the same time until observed going into the wormhole or being knocked off the course. Another commenter suggested that perhaps all quantum probability curves are just uncollapsed Polchinski paradoxes. The time-traveling story of PanAm Flight 914 was rather compelling at the time of its circulation, but in recent years it's been suggested to be the result of fabrication. The post had been shared over 75,000 times on Facebook in both Kenya and India, claiming that a plane that went missing in 1955 had mysteriously reappeared 37 years later. Flight 914 was said to be a Douglas DC-4, which was carrying 57 passengers on board along with 6 crew members. The flight had taken off from a New York City airport en route to Miami, Florida, on the 2nd of July, 1955. The flight was only supposed to last a few hours, but when it failed to arrive in the Miami airport, concerns began to rise. The aircraft was believed to have vanished above Caracas, Venezuela. and despite extensive search efforts, the plane was never discovered, nor were any of the passengers. Without evidence of wreckage, the disappearance of the flight remained a mystery. Fast forward to 1992. 37 years later, air traffic control in Caracas received a distress call from an unknown aircraft. It was soon deduced that the distress call was coming from Flight 914. The pilot knew that he was destined for Miami, and 3 hours later, he requested instructions for landing at his destination. It was said that when the crew and passengers had stepped off the aircraft, they appeared disoriented. The story quickly erupted, and many began to speculate that the flight had entered a wormhole or a time portal that sucked them in, spitting them out again years later. Many theorized that this was a time slip that the aircraft and the passengers had experienced. Some had stated that the entire ordeal was a hoax or even a government cover-up. Aviation experts alleged it to be a navigational error, which seemed most unlikely, as it would have had to stay fueled for 37 years, and the people on board would have to have aged that same amount of time if this were the case. This story continues to grab the attention of aviation enthusiasts as well as conspiracy theorists and believers of time travel, but is still one that is subject to much skepticism. Some investigators state that the lack of evidence, official records, and documentation leads to the belief that the event did not take place and is merely an urban legend. Other skeptics have revealed that the story appeared in a popular American tabloid that was known for such fictitious stories. It was published in an article back in May of 1985 in the Weekly World News. The tabloid was active from 1979 until 2007, until it was relaunched online in 2009. In the original newspaper article, an image of the alleged plane covers a section of the page. Above it reads a caption, "Stunned passengers of Flight 914 expected to touch down in Miami. They were 1,200 miles and 30 years off." A well-known fact-checking site known as Snopes has debunked this allegation back in 2019. But life was breathed into it yet again after the Brightside YouTube page published a viral video that was quickly viewed over 19.2 million times. In addition, the tabloid has published the story again twice more and used 2 different images of 2 different men who was supposed to be the eyewitness of Juan de la Carte, the air traffic controller. Ontology refers to a particular section in philosophy that deals with the nature and existence of being. The ontological paradox is known as the bootstrap paradox, which refers to information, a person or object that's sent back in time, creating an infinite loop where the person or the object has no observable origin. It's a hypothetical causal loop in time travel, in which one event has been caused by another, which had actually been the cause of the first. It also makes up a section of the major time travel paradoxes, along with a few others. This is a theoretical paradox of time travel, which comes into play when a piece of information is sent back through time and becomes trapped in an infinite cause and effect loop. The item no longer has a discernible origin point and is considered uncaused or self-created. One such example of this paradox would be if a time traveler were to go back in time and teach Albert Einstein the theory of relativity before going back to his own time. Einstein would then claim the work as his own, and over the decades, the theory would be published various times, until inevitably ending up in the hands of the time traveler, who then takes it right back to Einstein. The question, where did the theory originate, will present itself. It cannot be said that the theory of relativity had come from Einstein if it had been taught by the traveler, nor can it be said that the traveler had learned it from the scientist. The mystery then remains as to who discovered the theory. One issue associated with this conundrum, however, is the violation of the law of causality. With this, it can no longer be said that a past cause has led to a future event. The event could have equally been made in the future before leading to the past cause. This brings in a new suggestion. Instead of time moving from a stationary past to an undetermined future, all 3 times, the past, the present, and future, all exist at the same time. This leaves the task of defining the origin point meaningless. The bootstrap paradox suggests that there's a potential for predestination to causality. While the idea may not be as popular or as well known as the grandfather paradox, it's still one that philosophers and physicists have been struggling with for almost 100 years. Since the early 20th century, physicists have been paying attention to the time-traveling concept following the work of Einstein. The hypothesis distorts our understanding of both cause and effect. In a linear timeline of events in which A, a person hits a pool ball labeled as 1, B, one hits another numbered as 5, and C, where ball 5 hits another ball that's numbered as 6. Time passes in the timeline in a straight line, going from A to C, past to present, and then future. Each of the events causes the next, where A causes B and B causes C. This case is concordant with our understanding of the world where the future is uncertain and dependent on what happens in both the past and the present. If a time traveler is introduced to this equation and brings information from the event at C to influence A, where 6 then hits 1, the chain of events is distorted. The paradox exists where C is the cause of A. A solution to this paradox would be the concept of the multiverse. A traveler jumping back in time enters into a duplicate world that's identical to the one they had left. This may allow the traveler to modify the future however they please, because it's not predetermined. Any actions the traveler does will not affect the original universe. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.